Hello, and welcome to the Powder Room, where we discover the message within our messes. I am your host, Ivy Ashley. In today's episode, we will discuss the hidden dangers of unforgiveness and how holding on to resentment can impact your physical, emotional, and mental well being. We'll also offer tips on how to break free from unforgiveness and move forward toward healing. I am back. Did you guys miss us last week? I know, but a sister had to completely unplug and get away for a little bit. I mean, I was mentally and emotionally exhausted. So I took myself to Miami and I attended the Miami Open tennis tournament, which is my happy place, all things tennis, and I completely enjoyed myself. But I have to admit, I did miss doing the podcast last week because I don't know, I'm just finding such joy in doing this. And while this may be encouraging to you, it is definitely encouraging to me as well. And so I appreciate the time that you guys take to listen to me week after week and the positive feedback that I have received. So keep it coming. So on my way to the tennis tournament Sunday before last, I was listening to Pastor Darius Daniels, and he was preaching his sermon series. I think it's called Goated. And in his introduction, he made the following statement. He said, "Better can't come in until bitterness comes out. And bitterness can't go out until forgiveness comes in." And when I heard that statement, I was like, wow, that is a mouthful. And I just began to think how many people are impacted by unforgiveness and they don't even realize that they are being impacted because they're holding on to something that may have happened to them 5, 10, and 15 years ago, and even more than that. And they don't have the inability to release that unforgiveness and how that shows up in other areas of their lives. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So I know I had something totally different to talk about, but when I heard that statement, I just felt compelled to discuss unforgiveness this week because I believe that somebody listening to me needs to hear this today. But before I get started, let me make a couple things clear. First of all, I want you to know that your feelings are valid. This episode is not about nullifying your feelings or minimizing the offense. What happened to you happened, and I'm not trying to minimize that at all. However, what I would like to do is widen your scope so that you can possibly see things from a different perspective. Also, a couple weeks ago, we talked about self-awareness and how why we do what we do is self-awareness. So when I began to think about self-awareness, I also thought about could the source behind some of our actions be seated in unforgiveness? You know, we may find ourselves being consistently triggered by certain situations and circumstances, and we find ourselves responding to isolated events when the core issue is unforgiveness. I believe unforgiveness keeps us stuck and attached to a past offense that prevents us from moving forward. So you may say, no, Ivy, that does not apply to me. No, no, no. Because see, I've accomplished this, I have that. And that may all be true. But if you're honest, there's an area in your life that may not be flourishing as all those other areas. Now, I admit this is a very, very, very tough conversation that we're going to have today. And, excuse me, it requires honesty and transparency. But I believe if you allow the layers to be pulled back, you can begin to walk towards healing and forgiveness today. Now, you already know I got to start with a good definition. And so, unforgiveness is the unconscious or conscious decision to hold on to resentment, anger, or bitterness towards someone who has wronged you or someone you love. It keeps you emotionally tied to the offense, often leading to stress, anxiety, and strained relationships. Now, when we think about an offense that could lead us to not be forgiving towards someone, I think we always immediately go to like the huge things like some type of traumatic experience, which could be any type of abuse, or maybe having or seeing a loved one murdered, or a loved one that was killed by a drunk driver. Now, anyone in those circumstances would understand why it would be difficult to forgive someone who had done something to that extent, either to you or someone that you love. But what about some lesser known things or things that we don't immediately consider when we think about where the root of unforgiveness could come from? So, what about the fifth grade bully who bullied you through your whole fifth grade year, or that high school teacher that embarrassed you, or the time you co-signed for a car for someone that ended up messing your credit up, or the best friend who slandered your name, or the infidelity in your marriage that led to divorce 10 years ago, or the boss who fired you because you chose integrity. We really don't think about those things or incidents that could cause us to be unforgiving. And then as we try to move forward to other relationships, the seed of those incidents show up in other areas. And sometimes we don't even recognize that that's where the seed is. So now, based on the experiences that we've had, now all men are dogs. Now all women are trifling. Now nobody can be trusted. Now everyone is out to get you. And we have these thoughts and we have these mindsets that keep us from moving forward, all because we are not able to forgive whatever offense is holding us hostage. I think this is a very good place for us to talk about the dangers of unforgiveness. And they are: there's a physical impact, there's an emotional toll, there's a mental and psychological consequence, and also there's an impact on relationships. So the first one is there's a physical impact. And this information comes straight from the Cleveland Clinic. So it's nothing that I made up. I'm not a medical professional, or neither do I pretend to be one. But the physical impacts that unforgiveness can have is that it can increase stress. It can cause weight gain and weight loss, high blood pressure, risk of heart disease, weakened immune system, chronic health issues, disruptive sleep patterns, and fatigue. And then, among all of that, it can take years off of your life. Have you ever seen someone who is 35 and it looks like they are 85? And all because it's rooted in unforgiveness, because sometimes you can treat the symptom. So the symptom could be high blood pressure, but the core issue could be unforgiveness. So it's equally important for us to address health issues, but we also have to address the mental and emotional part of things as well. And so that takes me to the emotional toll that unforgiveness can take. So you feel trapped in negative emotions like anger, resentment, and bitterness. And because of that, there's an emotional bond to the offense. So staying emotionally connected to the wrongdoing, sometimes reliving it as if it just happened. Have you ever ran into someone who is always talking about an ex, who is always talking about, something that happened 20 years ago as if it just happened yesterday? It's because, they cannot get past that particular thing in their life. So they're always talking about their past. They're talking about the divorce. They're talking about the breakup. They're talking about getting fired. They're talking about, all of these things. So I got to a point in my life where, I wanted to blame the demise of my past relationships on my partners. But the truth is, I chose them. So there was something in me that I needed to address in order to move on. There were things that I allowed and subjected myself to that I should not have. And there's one particular relationship that I can think about, or that I think about, and I was in my mid 20s, and I thought I had found the love of my life, the man that I was going to marry. And he also, said that, God told him that I was his wife. And I held on to that. And I wanted to be married to this man more than anything. But needless to say, a few years later, we had done this, back and forth thing over the course of several years. And the next thing I know is he was announcing his engagement to someone else. You talking about somebody who was livid. And it took me so long to let go of the future that I thought I was supposed to have, because I could not release the unforgiveness that was in my heart towards him, because I blamed him for, not marrying me, thinking that um if he had married me, my life would have taken a totally different trajectory, which it probably would have. But now I look back on that area of my life and I thank God that, things did not pan out the way that I thought that they should have panned out. So, in order for me to be able to move on, I had to let go of any thought or appearance that I had about being his wife, and I also had to issue forgiveness um toward him for even blaming him for that. Now, it wasn't even a conversation that I needed to have with him. It was more so an emotional or mental release that I had to do on my own. And once I did that, I was able to, move on and move forward and even be open to having other relationships because I was so consumed with the idea of being his wife. I had no room for anybody else to even come in. So anybody that I dated for several years in my 30s, they absolutely had no chance before we even got started because there was a part of him that still took up resident in me. So here I am trying to have a relationship with somebody else, and they didn't even know that they was a part of a threesome that they didn't ask for. But that's what unforgiveness does. Also, during that time, I realized that it was difficult for me to experience any type of joy, peace, or contentment in that area. Now, I don't know if I made the connection that, it was a result of that and me still holding on to that relationship, but I do see it as so now. So, there was a part of me that, as it relates to relationships, I was all over the place. I definitely, was not happy at all. And I was completely unsettled, which caused me to be emotionally exhausted and even experience a little bit of anxiety. So, as long as you're holding on to what happened or what didn't happen in the past, you will not have the ability to move forward. You will always have that feeling of being stuck in a cycle of negative emotions, which will hinder personal growth and relationships. Is totally um difficult. I won't say it's impossible, but it's very difficult to move forward and consistently looking back at the same time. So the next one is mental and psychological consequences. So with that, there's an increased risk of depression and anxiety. There's overthinking and replaying past hurt. There's the persistent resentment where there's holding on to the pain caused by another person or situation. And the thing is that, and I heard Pastor Keon say this on the clip I listened to yesterday, and he said that unforgiveness makes you a slave to your memory. You remember anyone who ever hurt you and recall the offense like it just happened on yesterday. And when I think about that, that is torture. Sometimes we can actually be torturing ourselves by playing the offense over and over and over again. And I'm here to tell you that is no way to live. There is no way to live. You have to break free from constantly replaying that movie over and over again. It is time to let the credits roll and see the end at the end of those credits, because if you don't, it will drive you to a state of insane. And in addition to that, It will have an impact on your self-esteem and your self-worth. And we already talked about a couple of weeks ago, the key word in those two terms is self. So it does not behoove you to let an outside source or an outside situation impact the way you see yourself. Self-esteem and self-worth comes from within and not without. The last one is unforgiveness has an impact on relationships. So what happens is we build up those walls around our hearts, and it makes it difficult for us to trust people. We have strained friendships, romantic relationships, family, work connections. All of those are impacted by unforgiveness. And I know as it relates to my relationship with my dad, and just to give you a very, very brief history, because my daddy issues are a whole episode or maybe several episodes, but I just want to give you just a brief touch base on it right now. So I had a very close relationship with my dad for the first 8 years of my life. And then after that, our relationship became estranged. And then we spent the next several years trying to repair, that relationship. And he would make strides. I was still a child, so he would make strides to come and see me, make empty promises. Sometimes he would show up, sometimes he would not. And this happened throughout my late teens, 20s, 30s, up until the time that he passed away. But even before he passed away, I realized that I had said, I forgive you with my mouth, but those words had never taken root in my heart. And because I never resolved the fact of issuing forgiveness to my dad, everything my daddy was showed up in the men that I chose. I mean, I dated abandonment, I dated empty promises, I dated lies, I dated deceit, I dated lack of commitment. I dated my dad over and over and over and over and over again, and the men I chose, until I made a decision to issue real forgiveness, not for him, but for me, to be able to be sane and to be able to move forward and have a healthy relationship. Because if I didn't, that negative energy was going to keep repelling positive connections in my life. And there's a whole lot more to that story, and I'm sure I will share it with you in future episodes. So again, when we talk about the dangers of unforgiveness, it's not just about, emotions or having an emotional toll. There's a physical impact, there's a mental impact, and there's an impact on relationships if it is not addressed. Now, years and years and years ago, I heard Pastor or Bishop T.D. Jakes say this about unforgiveness. He said that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Man, let me say that one more time for the people in the back. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. So by holding on to unforgiveness, we watch ourselves slowly die in certain areas, waiting and thinking that some type of justice or revenge is going to happen to the other person, when the real impact is us and those of us who are harboring and holding on to unforgiveness. And I am here to tell you there is no amount of justice or revenge or misfortune that's going to satisfy you when it comes to the person that hurt you. Because nothing that is done to that person is going to make you feel any better. And the hurt is never going to be on the same level. So, the desire for justice and revenge, go ahead and release that right now, because even if that is the case, if something happens to them, it will provide you absolutely no satisfaction at all. The hurt will still be there. The offense would have still occurred. Nothing is going to change. So if you're waiting on some type of justice or to invoke or evoke some type of revenge on someone who hurt you, save your breath, save your time, save your money, save yourself, and put that same amount of energy towards forgiveness. Because justice and revenge is not the answer. It's not going to have the type of impact that you think it's going to have. And I don't know who that was for, but I just felt the need to say that please, whatever you're thinking about doing, you've been stewing and watching and planning and scheming, stop. Nothing that you do is going to make you feel any better. The only person that you can control in the current situation that you're dealing with is you. That's the only person you can do anything about. And so if you don't address the hurt, if you don't address the source of your unforgiveness, you're going to be that statement I just read, drinking poison and expecting the consequence to come to the person who hurt you when you're the one that's dying slowly. I know that's probably a hard pill to follow or to swallow. And I may have said that a little bit rough, so please forgive me. But sometimes, tough love is appropriate. Please put that energy towards healing and forgiveness. And don't focus so much on issuing justice or revenge. Now, with that, let's move on to the common misconceptions about forgiveness. The first one is, if I forgive, it means I'm excusing what they did. And it is not. That couldn't be the furthest from the truth. Forgiveness is not about condoning bad behavior. It is about freeing yourself. Again, forgiveness is not about condoning bad behavior. It is about freeing yourself. Trust me, you no longer want to be held hostage by something you had absolutely no control over. And let me reiterate, whatever it was not your fault. Please stop carrying that. It is not your fault. Somebody got free right then. Let me say it again. It is not your fault. You have been carrying that burden for years. It is not your fault. Please release that and say it with me if you need to. It is not my fault. It is not your fault, dear heart. It is not your fault. You've been blaming yourself for far too long, and you have not been able to experience peace. It is not your fault. So just because you forgive someone does not mean you excuse what happened and what they did. It is about freeing yourself up. The next one is, if I forgive, I have to reconcile with them. Absolutely not. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation at all. You can forgive a person without restoring the relationship, even if there was one, or if there was one from the beginning. Sorry about that. And I'm gonna tell you, some things should never be reconciled anyway. So no, reconciliation and forgiveness are two separate things. The last misconception is, if I forgive, they win. Absolutely not true. Forgiveness is about reclaiming your peace, not about who wins or who loses. Forgiveness allows you to move from a victim to an overcomer mentality because you went through that and you are still here to talk about it. This is one of those things where you can make your pain have a purpose, because there are so many people who have gone through what you have gone through and are not here to tell the story, but you survived it. You survived it. You made it through. You have a testimony. And so there is someone who needs to hear your testimony so that they can know that they can come out as well. So again, misconceptions about unforgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean you're excusing what they did. It does not mean you have to reconcile. And it does not mean that they win. It means that you win and move from victim to overcomer. The last thing I want to talk about today is how to break free from unforgiveness. What steps can we take to heal? And the first thing we have to do is to acknowledge the hurt, recognizing and validating your feelings. Acknowledgement is the first step because it is impossible to heal what you refuse to confront. And sometimes you have to forgive yourself first, especially if you blame yourself for any part of what happened. So first, acknowledge the hurt. And then next, shift your perspective, understanding that forgiveness is for your own peace and not the other person. Next, it's important to set boundaries, because forgiveness doesn't mean allowing continued harm. So it's not only setting boundaries for the person who may have victimized you, it's also setting boundaries for future relationships as well. And that's, not just romantic relationships, it's family. Sometimes you have to set boundaries with your family, set boundaries with your friends, set boundaries at work, just set boundaries. Also, it's good to, journal and use that as a method of self-reflection. And I find that, sometimes writing things down is a good way to process your emotions, but it's also a good way to get things out of your head and onto a piece of paper, because sometimes we can just have so much bogged down in our minds that we need to get it out. And sometimes it's not always, conducive for us to share things with, people in our lives. So the next best thing in order to get it out is just to take a pen and paper and just begin to write out your thoughts. And I find for me that writing is very, very therapeutic, very therapeutic. The last step that I have as a way to break free and to begin the healing process is going to therapy, coaching, or support groups. I believe in Jesus and I also believe in therapy. God is good and therapy is good. Amen. There is nothing wrong with going to therapy, nothing wrong. And I'm here to tell you that something does not always have to be wrong in order for you to go to therapy in the first place. I feel like, just consistently having check ins with a mental health professional keeps, for me, those lines of communication open. It makes me, it ensures that I have clarity in certain areas in my life. So, I've been consistently going to therapy now this round since I believe the beginning of December. And so it has done me a whole world of good. And I absolutely love my therapist. And she has helped me see things that I didn't have the ability to see on my own. And many times, therapists provide that avenue that helps you get clarity, and also helps you to move toward your own resolution. And it's good to have that safe space for somebody who does not know you personally, but is still able to give you an objective opinion or an objective view on whatever it is that you're seeking therapy about. So don't knock it, until you try it. And the hardest thing is just finding a great therapist that you can connect with. And it's always best to go, by word of mouth, ask around and see, who in your circle has a good therapist. A lot of these companies, have EAP programs where you can have a certain number of sessions a year for free. Use your benefits and seek therapy. If you have those benefits, please use them. I promise you will not regret it. So breaking free and steps towards healing from unforgiveness, acknowledge the hurt, shift your perspective, set those boundaries, use journaling, and also seek professional help. Jesus and therapy. And with that, we have come to the end of today's episode. As you know, our tagline for the Powder Room is where we discover the message within our messes. And so the mess today is forgiveness is hard, but holding on to resentment, bitterness, and anger makes life harder. And the message is you've suffered long enough. It's time to embrace forgiveness and the healing and wholeness your soul is in need of. So, your call to action is what's one small step you can take today towards forgiveness? I hope something has been said today to encourage you, to provoke you, to cause you to consider and want to be more self-aware of those things in your life or those areas in your life where you still could be harboring some unforgiveness, and also move you to address those areas so that it will no longer impact the areas of your life that need to be flourishing. I still want to hear from you guys. I encourage you to share your experiences, share your thoughts, share your opinions, share your constructive criticism. Let me know how this topic has impacted you today. Let me know what other topics you love the powder room to address. I am waiting to hear from you. You can reach me at the only Ivy Ashley on Instagram and on Facebook. You can also email me at consultivya, that's consultivya at gmail.com. Tune in with me next week where our topic will be red flag behavior. It has been my pleasure, and thank you once again for joining me in the powder room. Take care.